Hi, this is Dr. Alana James, and I am the founder and CEO of Doctoral.net. We are a technology company selling a professional development platform to our university partners. I am super excited today because for two reasons. One is I am sharing the way I do things as a writer. And this is a set of tools that I have used for years, and they are a major reason that I can turn out the amount of writing that I do every year. And this year it was 2 chapters in a book and a journal article. And that's been pretty much the average for me for the last couple of years. I couldn't do that if I didn't have good systems under me. So I'm really happy to share those systems with you. The second reason I'm super excited is that more of you, meaning more of the university customers that we serve, are showing up for this than any other topic we've ever had. So that makes me doubly happy, and I want to welcome you all very much. This session today builds on the session from last week. So if you weren't able to attend that, I'm going to repeat a few things for you so that you have a good grounding. And also you can go to Big Marker and see if you can sign up later and then get the recording. And if you can't, write Margie, M-A-R-G-I-E, at doctoralnet.com. I'll type that in, M-A-R-G-I-E at doctoralnet.com. Margie is always happy to get you the resources you need, and tell her that you would need the webinar before this one and give her the date. She'll be able to look up. Okay, so last week we repetitively looked at these reflective questions. And really, they're the reflective questions that are written in my heart that I think about every time I write anything, whether it's a blog post or a letter to my deans or a chapter or a book. Who is the most important reader of your writing? And for every writing you do, that person changes, and sometimes you have more than one. And then how can you ensure, meaning how can I as a writer ensure that I am giving my reader what they expect, want, are interested in, and hope for? Those 4 things guide my writing. So our goals for today are to be able to answer those questions and help you write a solid academic rough draft in a short amount of time. And one of the biggest challenges that we have as academic writers is keeping track of and maneuvering through our literature. Unlike other writers who aren't held to quite the same level of peer review standard, we don't get to say what we think. We have to sort of take the whole river with us as we write and think. So I think it's one of my fellow textbook authors who writes on quantitative work. And he mentioned that he thought a lit review was like trying to outline for our readers what the river is that is underneath us. So our work is in this constantly growing stream, and we know a whole lot about that stream behind us. And once we're caught up in it, we're pretty good at what the stream comes to us in the future. And we have to carry our writing with that stream. So you are all students. You're just starting to put your feet in these streams. Somebody who's been in the stream for a long time has thousands and thousands of pieces of lit that have added up to the little bubbles and little ideas. And we want to do a good job of pointing people back to those good ideas so they can follow us along. And we want to do a good job of being able to refresh ourselves as we go. And I just never came up with tools. Bibliographic software, I use EndNote. I keep things in it, but it has its own challenges. And I never, until about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, when I came up with the system I'm going to introduce you today. So our goal is to help you meet the criteria of writing based on literature. And I use the word hacks when I started to actually drill out these slides, because a hack is something that is designed to help us save time, make a hard job easier, and keep us organized. Those are the 3 things that hacks in the tech world technically do. So I consider this spreadsheet a hack. You'll have to tell me at the end if you think it is too. That doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to take you any time. It's just going to take you a different kind of time, and in my mind, my writing is easier because of it. And I don't do so many things that drive me nuts. Okay, so our agenda, I'm going to give you a little bit of overview, and then we're going to talk about these 5 steps. First, you decide what you're going to capture. Then you lay out your columns. Then you use spreadsheets in different ways. So we'll talk about the use of them in different ways. Then we'll talk about, once you've got the spreadsheet kind of where you want it, how you sort your ideas before you write. And then we'll talk about writing and reflecting. At the end of each section, I'll stop for a minute and ask if there's any questions in the room. So if you have something that hits you as you go, you want to ask, don't be shy. Type it in the chat. We'll take care of questions after each one of the steps, because I don't want anybody to be lost. And for anybody who might have, I see our attendance have gone up about 10 or 15 since I started. If you've just joined us, there are 3 handouts. You'll probably find the handouts close to the chat, in a tab close to the chat. And you'll want to have some of them open. So let's talk a little bit just in overview. Again, the most important question when you write, who's your most important reader? And then how can you ensure that you give them what they expect, what they want, what they're interested in, and what they hope for? Well, essentially, everything we write is a funnel. And it generally works out that what they expect needs to be in the top part, generally done. What they want to hear more about catches their interest, drives them down the funnel a little bit, gets into what they're interested in, and then it drives them, hopefully, if we're good and if we're provocative and if we have things to say that they haven't thought of before, we've taken them through the funnel and we give them what they hope for. Because most readers hope for that they're going to be provoked and they're going to leave with new ideas. Science-based writing follows the same funnel. Background leads to literature, leads to methodology, leads to results, leads to findings, leading to discussions. And so that overview, those 5 or 6 things that we just end up always thinking in those ways, actually are the same kinds of answers to the questions of expect, want, interested in, or hope for. And I see in the chat, some people may be having difficulty finding the handouts. I don't know what your screen looks like exactly, but I suspect you have a right-hand column that shows you the chat. And handouts are one of the tabs on that column. So I hope that helps. So before we go into the how do you do it, which is the substance of today, I want to just make a couple of thoughts about spreadsheets. You will find in your doctoral net materials from your university that we use spreadsheets a couple of ways. One is to help you compare and contrast your models. So we suggest to you when you're writing a thesis or you're writing a dissertation or a very big body of work for the first time, that the very first thing you do is go find models. And if you go to your website, that your university.doctoralnet.com website, and you go to your account, you'll find that there's some on-demand webinars, and one of those has to do with finding models. Last week's session also talked about models for every kind of writing, for journal writing, for every kind of writing. It's the same idea. You find other people's work that has been there before you, and you figure out a way to pull it apart in a column of a spreadsheet, and then you do 2 or 3 right next to each other, and then you track left to right, comparing how they did it. That exercise will cost you about an hour to 2 hours time, and you will get so much out of it. It will save you, depending on the size of what you're writing, weeks, maybe months of time. So that's one use of spreadsheets. Today, we're going to talk about something a little different. We're going to talk about capturing and organizing notes in spreadsheets in such a way that you can get the idea and track back to the lit, and to some extent at least get your reference sheet started all in one easy go. There's 2 things you need to do when we start. One is freeze panes, and I'll get to that in a minute. But you'll always want to have your top row frozen, because these things get very big and very unwieldy. And so if your top row is frozen, you'll be able to scroll and always know which column is which. And then I'll talk at the end of today about how you can use your columns for categorizing and sorting. Okay, so that's just a little bit of overview. Let me ask before we go on. One last thing. I work with people sometimes privately. I've worked with people who I've suggested this suggestion to. And here's the thing. You guys are all really good students. You wouldn't be a master's or a doctoral student if at some point in your past you hadn't been good at being a student. Part of being a student may be that you're really good at holding things in your head. But let me tell you, absolutely and positively, the further you advance, the less likely it is you can hold all your ideas in your head and put them together. So I find that sometimes people who are struggling especially are really hesitant to put things down on paper. And I've wondered about why. So it might be because putting things down on paper saves you, and I have that in quotes with tongue in cheek, from seeing the flaws. Because it's hard to put all the things down and you immediately are confronted with where you can't quite do it. It also saves you from allowing others to have input, because if I'm working with you as a coach or somebody else is trying to help and you can't pass them a document that they can look at, they can't help you. Having everything in your head, you can go through, and I know I do this myself when I'm doing a presentation. I'll go over and over and over what I think I'm going to say, and it sounds so good, but it makes me feel safe. But until I get it down, I don't see where the holes are. And in fact, trying to hold things in your head is significantly slower than getting things down, whether they're good or not. So my final comment as our beginning is, if you take nothing else out of today, take my really strong recommendation that you get into a habit of getting your ideas down on paper. And then when somebody wants to help you and they ask to see your stuff, you've got things, even though flawed, even though in mini draft form, you've got them so where somebody can see them, where they can have input to you. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to the second section in a second. Raise your hand if you have a question, because if you do, I'll wait until you can type it in. No hands going up yet. It's probably because we haven't gotten into the meat of it. Good. Glad you're with me. Okay, starting the second section, we're looking at how to get started. So you need to put some time before you write into some pre-thought, and that's the most important reader, and what do they expect, want, and hope for, interested in and hope for. And we want to list some ideas, and we want to figure out what goes where. Now, I've done this many ways. If you want, by the way, if you want this funnel drawing, you can have it. I'm happy to send it on to you because I use it myself. I open up a Word document, I put the funnel on it, I think about, expect, want, interested in, and hope for. I put some text boxes out to the side. I try to work out my ideas. But I've actually discovered something that's a little easier. So you want it, your goal is to get ideas down, written fast as possible. If you open the Microsoft Word document that I gave you, you're going to see that it has a table in it. That table is actually, I think I filled it out, or I filled one part of it out with my professional development thing that I was working on next. Let me open my own copy in the background. And what I found about Microsoft Word is that you can put a table in, and then it will be able to, you can move things around quickly in a table. You can click and then click again and hold, and things move. And that's the important thing when sorting ideas, isn't it? Is that we can move them around, and yet you can have them in a form that can print and save and all that good stuff. So if you have that document open, I suggest you just might want to highlight one of those things, click on it, and then drag. And lo and behold, it moves. So now you can begin to see, you've got the top of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, the golden threads or main points. You can begin to see what ideas are going to go where, and you can begin to put your headings in place. This will not do for big projects like a dissertation. So that's going to be a conversation later. But it will do for journal articles. And if you'll notice, the second table I put on my document is a beginning layout for a journal article. And then you could put different columns under those tables, and you could put ideas around background, etc. And you could begin to flesh it out. Before we move on to 3, any questions? Raise your hand, and if there are questions, I'll wait for a second. Ooh, one hand is raised. Excellent. Okay, I'll wait. I really love it when people have questions, and there are no stupid questions. We all have an idea, and you're good. You'll be able to figure things out. So Di is writing. How to use the Microsoft Word file. Excellent. Thank you for asking. All right. The idea was that you would make your own, you would go to Microsoft Word for your writing, and you would put in a table that had 3 columns. And the left-hand column would be essentially the top of your funnel, the general ideas, the what the person, let me go back to our research question, what the person expects or wants. The middle funnel is what they want or they're interested in, and then the golden thread or main points. Golden thread is that idea that you have that you want to drill all the way through everything you write. When we talk about dissertations, the golden thread is really important because it's the consistency that drives the entire big body of research clear through to the reader. And you'll find lots of things that we've talked about that will help you with that. So the idea here is you're beginning to write a smaller piece. You put in your 3 columns and a bunch of rows, and you begin to think, and you just spit out ideas. What are the topics for your top of your funnel? What are the topics for the middle? What are the main ones? And then when you realize that really you've got something in the top that's going to fit better in the main, you highlight it, click on it, and drag it over to the other place. And that lets you sort as you go fairly easily. I've played with outlines, I've played with other kinds of things, and for me, the most important thing is that I don't have to spend a lot of time getting my ideas down. This works for me. Is that, Di, what you need? What is the onset of digital? Doop, 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 doop. Where is it? Where is the onset of digital? You're looking at a spreadsheet, maybe. Connolly, is that right? Under the top of the funnel column in the first table. The row of PD. Oh, yeah, I moved it over to the middle. Okay, so this particular idea is actually the next thing I want to write. I'm doing 3 thought leadership pieces about digital professional development. And so I had history, and the history, so the top of the funnel might be the role of professional development. I'm right to deans and provosts of universities. So I might give a sentence or 2 about the role of professional development in their college. I might give a little bit of history about professional development. I might draw on the lit of professional development. And then I might make a comment that with digital, professional development changes, and therefore we have a current state of affairs. That was my top of the funnel. Then I might go into some literature and talk about some best practices that came from the lit. And then I'm working out now what my golden thread will be. Basically, my golden thread is always, hey guys, you can do this better if you incorporate some digital tools. Does that make sense? Good. Row 4 and column 1. Thank you. Okay. So, are we okay? Any more questions? No more hands going up? Okay, let's go on to the next. Oh, a hand went up. Louis, I'll wait. So all the way through this, your questions, though, they brought up some really good points to me, which is, I hope you are thinking about this in terms of how do I do this? So I'm hoping that you have in your mind something you need to write, and you're thinking, are these ideas going to work for me? So if it's a small something, a table will be helpful. I bet that the funnel and the questions will always be helpful. They always get me grounded. The smaller parts of the funnel are your most important ideas. You have to get somebody down that funnel. You have to keep, Louis, you have to keep your reader. That's the thing. In today's world, if there is so much possible to read that if we aren't good, they don't stay with us. You know, some authors suggest that we get a minute and a half. I know probably you yourselves have been out there in the world of literature, and if the abstract doesn't grab you, you're not going to go into the bigger document. So we need to get good at this. As academic writers, we need to write. My soapbox for today is, as academic writers, we need to learn from the counterparts in the rest of the world. We need to be quicker, smarter, more targeted, and we need to catch our readers. And this is how it's done. Okay. Now, one more time, I'll ask, anybody else have a question? Okay. Keep your reader down the hole. Yes. With so much information, you're exactly right. We need to keep people involved, even though we have a lot to say. Raise your hand if you have ever gone to sleep reading an academic text. Of course. In fact, they used to make comments about have a pile of journal articles next to you if you ever have trouble. We don't want to be. Here, I'm going to host this. Now, I'll do it again. Your hands are down. Raise your hand if you want to be one of those authors. If you want to be an author that puts people to sleep. No, we want to be authors like in my life, it's Chris Argyris, wrote in the 70s. I still find his things incredibly provocative. I want to be one of the writers that lasts twice past my lifetime. We want to engage people, keep them awake and interested. Well done, Tony. I agree. Okay, so let's see how we do that. I think these tools will help you do that. That's a bold statement, but I think it's true. Okay, they help me do it. So our second snippet here then is to look into how do we lay out these magic spreadsheets. So we start with 2 steps. Freeze your top row and make your squares big. And that looks like these 2 things. And I've frozen the screen. This is Word 365. We all probably have different versions. So this is 365. It's Excel 365. So I can type in, it says, what do you want to do? And I type in the word freeze, and it brings up freeze panes. And the middle freeze pane says freeze top row. I always do that first. And then I highlight it, and I make it a color. So if you open up the spreadsheet that I gave you, you'll see that it has a yellow top line. And if you scroll up and down, that top line stays there forever. And that's really important. This is a small spreadsheet. This is only, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 lines of lit. My bigger ones, socialization, PhD socialization, 80, 90 pieces in it. And the more pieces you get, the more ideas that you're trying to capture, the longer and wider your spreadsheets get. So the very, very important, you can always see that top row that is your header row. Okay, that's the easy part. We got the spreadsheet set up. Just a couple of comments about that. The columns, the first column is always references. Now, you'll notice on the one that I sent you, the professional development one, that actually column A says sort mechanisms. I'll come back to that. But it started out, this spreadsheet started its life with column A, and every one of my sheets starts out with column A is always the reference. That way you never lose it. You always know who said what. And you capture not a perfect APA reference because you don't honestly know at the end how much you're going to use that. You capture enough you can find it later easily. If you want, I have EndNote. You probably all have your own reference library software. If you don't have reference software, get some right away. Wikipedia has a really good page on all the millions of kinds there are. And you want to be able to capture your authors, your date, the name, anything that's going to help you get back to your PDF, wherever your PDF folders are, or however your documents end up being. Some of you might have lots of books, whatever. So your reference, you can work at it and you can make them perfect from the very beginning. But I find I spend a lot of time doing that and not doing the thinking I need to be doing. So I've taken now to just writing in enough that I can find it later. Every choice you make about this has unintended consequences. The unintended consequence of going it short now is that you stand a risk you can't find it later. Raise your hand if you've ever had that problem. You thought, oh yeah, I could get this, and then this disappeared. Of course. Yes, I say the raise your hand part, and thank you all for take the time to do it, because some of the people who are with us are probably master's students and they haven't had as much experience doing this. But I want everybody to know that some of the problems we have are very common problems. And it's useful to be able to help each other out. Okay, so we set up the spreadsheet for one kind of writing, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that you won't use these again, but at the time you're setting up your spreadsheet, you're thinking about the thing you are going to write next. Or you are thinking about a general literature search for your dissertation, and that's a different thing, and we'll come to it in a minute. All right, so you've got one thing in mind. And if you're doing a journal article, then your columns may be easy. They may be as easy as reference, main position. I always use a main position as my B column. It tells me the main thing I got out of that article, the reason I kept it, the reason it was important, because oftentimes that's the one thing I can remember years later. And then all the columns after that might be background, lit, methodology, results, findings, discussion, because those are the headings that we are going to use when we write journal articles, and every journal article we've ever read has. So we can do two things. We can say, oh, this idea belongs in my background, so I'm going to use background that way. Or it can be, oh, this person has a really interesting something they said in their background, and I can put it there. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's with me. We're now talking about the intersection between columns and rows. Your row is a piece of writing. The first box on that row is your reference. The second box is the main position. And then every box after that is some kind of an idea. And you have to figure out what those columns are going to be used for. The one I gave you, reference, first column, first box, main position of that author, those authors, second box. And then because I write and read about teaching and learning, I have found that the column headings construct, connect, and learning design suit me pretty well. Construct is the basic idea that drives this article. The connection is between either it and my work or between it and other things. So there's something there that's sort of the what interests me piece of the funnel. And the learning design is pretty typically close to the bottom of the funnel for me, because that's what I'm always trying to do, is get people to think about digital learning in a new way as part of their learning design. So I use construct, connect, learning design a lot. But you are all in different fields. So if you were in a history field, you might have dates on your columns. If you're in a scientific field, you'll probably have the background lit methodology, although you might have methodology out in several, and you might have some, if you're in computer science and you're doing simulations, or you're in the lab and you're doing medical science research, you might have several columns that are the specificity of those kinds of issues. So that's the part that is very much has to do with your writing. Now, I'll ask if there are questions. Good. I'll wait. And J. Mark, by the way, has put up some ideas that you all might want to look about fixing references. It's good if you want to throw up ideas for each other as well. Do you have a suggestion for the social sciences? Connolly, tell me more. Social science kind of big. Are you studying a human issue with live populations, lived experience kinds of things, or broad-based census level social science? Give me a little bit more feedback, please. Can you explain column A? Louis, I'll wait on that one. Column A is a whole nother part of this topic. So I'll come to, promise you won't go away without knowing about column A. What are the additional columns that are filled in beyond the learning design? For example, okay, so very, very good question. So what else happens as you're going through this? And you all, I think you can probably identify with this. So you're reading away, and most of your authors, you can you can put some things in the right boxes and you go. But then you find an author who's got some really important stuff that you want to capture and you don't know what to do with it. So the first thing I do is I put it in unheaded columns. Another thing I do, if it seems to, like that green leads us to students, telling students how good the tools are. At that moment, as I was reading, this particular author took me to something else I was writing about or thinking about, so I highlighted that. Later on, I'll come back and I'll look at that green and I'll say, oh, what was that about? And I'll read the ones to the left, and I have a 75%, 80% chance I'll remember. So a good portion of the work on these tools is on this tool is that its purpose is to give you your lit and help you remember what was important about that thing to you at the time you read it. And you can play with, do you color code them? Do you highlight them? Whatever you do, once you start making your tables, that's up to your creativity. But the more you kind of give yourself mental tweaks, it's good for neuroscience has taught us that what wires together fires together. Color wires for me. Writing things down wires for me. I always took good notes and I never looked at them because the taking of the notes made it fire and I could remember. Okay, Connolly and sociology and the build environment. Perhaps you could speak more about the last column. What for me is learning design. Well, for me, learning design is involved in the complexity of how people in universities, professors, and then from professors to program chairs to programs, design learning. So you all decided on a university you were going to go to, and then you went to that program, and that you go to that program and they have a learning design in place for you. And it works probably pretty well. on the other hand, the world is changing and complexity is happening. So that learning design is taking a hit. Things are complex. So when I think about learning design, I'm thinking about the outcome of whatever these ideas that were the construct ideas and whatever the connections were. How did that impact this complex situation that is learning? That's what it means to me. I have, if we drill more into the questions of the spreadsheets, at the end today, once I finish with the slides, I'll jump to screen share. And I don't mind staying on a little longer. And I have open on my other screen the full thought leadership database with all of the sheets I've ever done. So you can see kind of how things have developed for me over big literature. But right now I want to, we got to start with baby steps. So raise your hand if you're comfortable so far that you've got your idea, you're going to write something, you're going to put your references down, you're going to capture the main position, and then you're going to start to use columns to capture similar ideas between authors. Is that making sense? Just give me a few hands up. Only a couple. Could use a few more. Come on, people, raise your hand. Good. All right. I'm getting enough hands raised. I think 25%. I think many of you are just not big hand raisers. Okay. I'm going to let anyone want to try go towards the end, but if at the end somebody wants to take me through ideas, we can discuss them. And you've seen this. It's the one I gave you. Are there any other questions? Ready to move on to using them for big issues? Okay, our third snippet is about using a spreadsheet for literature in dissertations or thesis. First step is that you don't have to think about who your reader is so much, it's your committee. And what they expect is that everything you write is exactly backed up to whomever you said it. You cannot make a strong statement in a dissertation or a thesis on your own without having a citation after it. So it becomes super important that you can pull those citations as at need. So you're going to start with a blank sheet, and it's going to have your references, and it's going to have the main position. And then you're going to start teasing out the questions, the main topic areas that you're going to need your reader through your lit. And that's got a few complexities to it. So one of the things that makes this use of a spreadsheet a bit more difficult is that you're going to have 100 or more references. You're not going to use them all at the end. Right now, you're just capturing what people say when you start. And then later on, you're going to need to be able to sort those into the ones you're really going to use. And so you want to have some good practices. You want to have you want to have a good folder that all the PDFs go into. You want to have bibliographic software. And as soon as you are pretty sure you're going to want to use this piece, then you not only put it into your spreadsheet, but you move it into your software and you hook the PDF to it. That means you're not going to lose something or not be able to find it because the title on the PDF was so significantly different. I don't know why they spend PDFs that are just numbers, because nobody's ever going to find them if we don't remember to redo the title later. So I have a folder called References for Writing. Every time I take on a new one of these adjunct topics that circles around master's and doctoral students finishing and professional development and socialization of PhD students and all of those things, there's a new folder, and then everything that is for that goes into that folder. But you don't want to, you want to practice discrimination. So you don't want to do all the upfront work only to read the article to find out it had a really good abstract, but it had nothing else of interest in it. You want to use the spreadsheet to put out the things that are provoking your ideas forward. So only record the good ones. Now, on your university websites, there's something called the logic of design. And if you haven't found the self-assessments yet, they are, you sign into your university.doctoralnet site using your university email and your password, and you sign in, and on the left-hand side, one of the to-dos says self-assessments or automations. You can get to it several ways, but they are quick ways to test your ideas on your research design. The last one is called the Logic of Design tool. It's also called something with, has to do with having consistency between the rest of your design and your literature. It's important for your lit. Every time you change your methodology, you change the lit you need to have. Let me explain that. If your methodology, I'll use a social science since somebody asked about social science. If your methodology is to do surveys about leadership, obviously you're going to have a lot of lit on leadership. But later on, you find that you need to ask some survey questions about their role in management or some new things that are happening in management. You're also going to need that in your lit. So every time you change your methodological thinking a little, it will impact the literature you need to have. And I think the Logic of Design tool does a pretty good, fast way of helping you keep that on track. And if you have any questions about it, email me at alana@doctoralnet.com, and I'll put in a how to use it seminar for people if there's enough of you interested. Okay, then we have, you read and analyze your lit, and you have a full spectrum of lit. So it becomes kind of hard to keep it all in your mind. And this is when you need to add new columns. So you have a new idea, you're reading along, and you have been thinking about this general topic in a complex way. And then suddenly you see that really you have two strands. So when you have those ideas, you need to put in a new column, change the heading slightly, and start differentiating things across the strands. And I'll show you why. It'll make a big difference in how fast you can write later on. So you've now got a really big spreadsheet. This is a screen capture of my really big spreadsheet. This is the socialization of PhDs. And theoretically, PhD completion research has been hooked to socialization for 50 plus years. So there's a lot of PhD retention and completion research. And if you notice, this spreadsheet has some interesting things that show up. So there's like 80 columns or 80 rows, and it goes so wide. This is a screen capture, and it's got probably, I made it really small, so I probably captured 7 or 8 columns, maybe 8 or 9 columns. My spreadsheet itself is 3, maybe 4 times wider than that. So this is a big, unwieldy document. And right away, though, you'll notice some things. The top blue arrow points to, what is it, the third column. It has almost nothing in it. Now, that's significant for a very important reason. That was an idea, might be, I don't know actually because I move my columns around, but it might be an idea. You might have these ideas that your topic will have, there will be lit on this portion of your topic, and you make it a column. And later on, you find out there's not very much in that column. You possibly have a gap that your literature will fall into. So nothing there. It either means you have to work harder, or you shouldn't include it in your lit because they don't have very much to say, or you just pinpointed your gap. Second thing is column E has so much in it, and they're big, big boxes of things. So it might need to be refined and broken up. If you have too much, it's cumbersome. Now, what makes, I mean, you may be saying to yourself, why is she doing all this work? Why is this so important? And it has to do with sorting. So before I take us there, which is the magic of where we are going, are there any questions? No questions. Going once, going twice, sorting. Okay, there are two sort mechanisms. I'll show you the one that's on this yellow, and then I'll show you the one that's on that long, ungodly spreadsheet. I'll switch to screen share. So for the one on the yellow, this is, it's only 15 or 16 documents. I did a review of what is professional development. I'm looking to write short, easy to read emails with a longer blog post about a topic, send it out to deans, provocative title. If they click open, it means to me that they're interested in professional development, and they might be people I want to have conversations with later. So there are three sort mechanisms. One is about the lit, an overview of the lit. I thought that they might be interested in a lit review, a small lit review. One is overcoming reticence from graduate students who don't attend professional development, overcoming what we know about reticence. Third is what the role of professional development is and how it's changing. And 4, maybe why to embrace. So I had these 15 or 16 things. I read through them again, and I generally sorted which ones I would be using them on, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, if I click on column A, and I go to the Home tab, and I go to Sort A to Z, it opens up Expand Selection, and I sort, and all the ones come up together, and all the 2s come up together. So I can read them across, and I can ask myself, are these still the same? Are these the best things? So that's, now let me just look ahead. Okay. I'm going to switch. This is a bit risky, but I'm going to switch to screen share. Okay. So tell me, raise your hand, somebody, if you're seeing my screen now. Yes. Okay, it worked. What we're looking at is I call it my thought leadership database. And this is 5 or 6 years of what I have written about. And some of them are titled specifically to, but PhD socialization is the one that I showed you that long screen capture. Now, what are my columns, and why is it so important to be able to click and search? All right, so column C was the one that I pointed out didn't have very much in it. It's a theoretical column. So say I wanted to pull up what I had found was the most interesting idea in socialization theory. I've now clicked on the Home tab. I go over to Sort A to Z. I always use Custom Sort because Custom Sort always brings up this option of expanding selection. What you absolutely don't want to do is ever let it just sort one column, because then you lose all the connections of that column back to the reference. And the most important thing here is that every idea continues to track back to the authors that used it. So I hit sort. My column has headers. I want to head on the theory column. And I hit OK. And voila! This big ungodly spreadsheet becomes easy to use, because all of a sudden everybody who ever talked about theory that was interesting enough that I captured it is there. And this is what makes it totally wonderful for writing, is that then I can read my columns. The problem has always been with literature that we take in input in the rows. So our memory hooks to that row of experience. So for instance, Van Manen, one of my favorites, Towards a Theory of Organizational Socialization, a classic work, 1978, love this, said very important things. What do I think about when I see his name? I think about how impressed I was. I think about the fact that it's early work and it was so important that I still want to refer to it. I'm not great at remembering the specifics of it. And I'm sure I'm going to put there, and now I'm tabbing across with my arrow key. I'm not going to remember that it argued that in settings where they are treated well, recruits are allowed to import skills, knowledge, and value. I'm not going to remember his arguments. And this is what happens when a spreadsheet goes on and on and on and on. You pick up something new, and it will still have impact on your ideas that are wide. And so now I can go over to whatever that column was when he was arguments. Okay. So I can tell you specifically what has happened here. So I had read for years and years about theory, and I actually had several columns. And I'm interested in educational leadership, so a lot of my reading has to do with management of educational leadership. And then I came across Susan Gardner's work, and I've actually based a lot of what I do with Doctoral Net on Susan Gardner. She says that the reason graduate students drop out is because of 5 frustrations: ambiguity, work-life balance, support, too much or too little independence, and not having the right skills. So I went back into the socialization research, and I put up a column for each of those things. I thought she had it pinned out right. So when I first came across them, I wrote a column for each one, and then I went back into my lit, and I started finding things, and I started seeing if I could track other people's socialization into her 5 things. And I found that I could. And then I set up a survey. You're going to get a chance to do it in the next couple of weeks. It's called the 5 Frustrations Survey. And you will get a chance to talk about your graduate experience across these 5 things. And so now we're backing up real experience with lit. It's all very good stuff. So now I want to write about, say I get some really interesting findings, and you guys say some great and very interesting things about too little or too much independence. I can come back to this. I can click on home. I can sort, custom sort, expand the selection, go to Susan Gardner's Independence, click OK, and track whether or not things you say were backed up, similar or different, etc., to what the lit said. Now, raise your hand if you're a graduate student and you think this might just be really important for your dissertation. Because what will have happened is that you will have set up your literature, and later on you're going to have data. If you set up your lit in a spreadsheet following the topics that are the themes you're studying, or if you go back in once you've uncovered new themes and you sort your lit in a spreadsheet into those, then you can click on them and right away you can get a touch point about whether or not your data backs up or refutes what other people have said. Hugely important, hugely easy. So I write books. And when you write a book, keeping all your ideas, it's a big challenge. So what I do is and my dog is helping. Isn't she? She's helping us sort. So I click on a part of the book, and then I have everything I thought I was going to put there, and then I go to bed. And then when I wake up the next morning and I'm ready to write, my subconscious mind has been able to help me put the ideas I thought I was going to have together. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to come back to our screen, our slides, and I'm going to ask who's got questions. Oops. There we go. We're opening again. Paul, I'm waiting. And anybody else, raise your hand if you have a question. Now, I said at the beginning, this is a bit to take in. So if you're starting and you're writing things for class, or you're writing smaller papers, you might want to start with the process then. Because if you're halfway through your literature on your PhD, you're taking a big lift. So you might consider how much lift you want, maybe you want to write your lit review and then only pour into the spreadsheet the things you actually used, so that when you have your data, you can have the spreadsheet to write from. How do you decide on your themes and keywords? That's the big issue, Paul. It's a developmental process, and it is iterative. I had the one I showed you with Susan Gardner has a whole bunch of columns that I didn't use anymore once I found Susan Gardner. And it took a day to resort all of that lit into Susan Gardner's ideas. But it was such an important breakthrough of my ability to, 50 years of socialization research, very difficult to sort it all out to where you can get a consistent thread. Susan Gardner made it easier. It worked. It was worth the sorting. So, Paul, I guess the short answer is you do the best you can as you go along. And every time you think to yourself, oh, would this work better? Maybe I'll make a change. Consider whether the change how much it will be of benefit. The Susan Gardner change, totally of benefit. Very glad I did it. Other changes I've made in the past, they didn't work out. But our ideas don't always work out either. At least we aren't chasing our tails with this. We remember which things we did. We can always go back. That's why I've got this one spreadsheet that goes back years. I still need socialization literature from time to time. I still go back to that page and find it. Hopefully that's helpful. Would you create a tab for each dissertation? Oh, yeah, a tab at the bottom. There's sheets in the spreadsheet. Chapter, project. I would actually. Well, okay, so for a dissertation, it's your topic area. But in your literature, you might have background lit. You might have, it's a matter of overlapping. There's not a one size fits all with that, Hannah. It depends on how much they overlap. If this author, A, is going to be used everywhere, then that's a suggestion that maybe you're going to need lots of columns. And rather than have separate sheets, you want to have lots of columns. If your ideas are more compartmental, like I can compartmentalize the digital part away from the socialization part, away from the something else part, then I can set up different sheets, because those are going to have different authors, because different authors write to different fields. Okay. Okay. Now, Bethany had to leave. If you use Google Sheets, you will have the benefit of version history. Okay. We all have the tool we like best. I don't like Google Sheets. I've had bad things happen as far as things getting lost, where I haven't had with Excel. So it's good. Paul, you're welcome. I just want to say a few things. We've run over time, and I'm willing to continue talking, but some people have to leave. Reflect, rewrite, revise is always the final step to everything. They go on and go on and go on. We're always reflecting, writing, and revising. So I want you to be aware that there are lots of tools that help with those things. If you haven't looked into the 30-day writing challenge or the 10-day writing boost, they are both under your resources tab. They're excellent. Box sets, also there's some on academic writing, also under the resources menu on your sites. If you're writing specifically, you're a master's student or you're a PhD, phase 2 is the writing component of all the menus for PhD students, and the master's has a whole section on writing. So go look at the content under the menus too. Really good stuff there. And if you haven't looked at the on-demand webinars, they're under your accounts tab. Those are I could use this slide for everything we talk about. These are our best tools for you. So make sure you familiarize yourself with that part of the library and keep coming back. Also, Margie at Doctoral Net, always glad to help you find stuff. And revising and thinking. You're all on your own personal journey with your own personal ideas. And we hope to always give you the tools to help those ideas not waste so much time. Academia can take too much time. No, okay. So what sites am I talking to? Di ask a question account page on doctoralnet.com. So if you are lucky enough to have a university subscription, then your Doctoral Net site is your university initials.doctoralnet.com. Morgan.doctoralnet.com, sdstate.doctoralnet.com, appstate.doctoralnet.com, calpoly.doctoralnet.com. And your sign-in is always your university email. And then those letters again, 1, 2, 3, exclamation mark. Easy. You all have a similar system to get into a variety of sites. Your university has taken some time to help personalize your site to your experience. And when you download a Doctoral Net app and you sign in with your university name, it's your university app as well. And that's where the account is, and that's who's got on demand. Some of you find us, and we don't ever want to throw a student away if you're from another university, and you will sign into main.doctoralnet.com. It is a membership site, and you will have everything but the on-demands available. And a few bells and whistles, but not many. So Repeat our password. Sure. Your password. Conley, what university do you go to? Morgan. So you are morgan.doctoralnet.com and your password is Morgan123 exclamation mark. By the way, Morgan students, we're having a challenge. If Richard's in the room, thank him very much for this. Richard, you're here. Thank you very much for working with me on why you weren't getting 30-day challenges and the writing boost. If you sign up for anything under resources and you go to Morgan and you don't get it, one, write your dean because it's a Morgan firewall issue. And two, write me and tell me what other email you use that you were going to sign up for these things with. I don't mind, and it's not impossible that you use your Gmail accounts or your other accounts and get our resources, but we can't have the full capacity of what we do unless we know that that person at Gmail is somebody who we hook to Morgan. WVU, excellent, Toby. Yeah, okay, very good, Kevin. That's it. Thank you, Richard. He really stuck with me. He kept saying, but I'm not getting it. And I kept saying, but it looks like you are. We worked it out. There's a firewall issue. The dean knows about it. That means he sent it on. These technological problems take time. But we work with services that have firewalls, and the firewalls sometimes don't connect to each other. And if you're at University of New Hampshire, please tell everybody you know to look. UNH put up a difference in the UNH mail system. You've got a folder for emails that come from somebody you've never opened an email from. So you get a new email from us. You've never opened an email from us, so it goes into this weird folder. It's not quite spam, but it's along those lines. We couldn't understand why an entire university's user ratio hit the ground. It's because of these kind of changes. Makes my life interesting. Paul, thank you. Take care. And this is being recorded. You can see it again. We're breaking it into snippets. And you'll see snippets at the first of the year. Very good. All right. Anybody else? I'm turning off the recording now. And thank you if you watched by recording.